So let's talk about parts, especially as it relates to trauma. So when it comes to trauma, we talk a lot about fragmented parts, but really the concept of parts is not new. And it goes like this. It's that we have basically sub personalities. We all have sub parts of ourselves. On the extreme level, like all the way on the other end of the spectrum, we're talking about things like dissociative identity disorder, but we all have this concept of parts. So, kind of how does this look at its most simplistic definition? Well, it goes like this. Part of me is really excited about pursuing my PhD. It's been a lifelong dream. I absolutely want to go get my PhD. And part of me is absolutely terrified because it's an insane amount of work and an extreme time commitment. And I kind of feel like I have no life now. I'm definitely not going to have a life once I start my PhD. But now I have two parts, part of me that's excited and part of me that is afraid. And those two parts coexist and they can get into conflict with one another, so they can affect decision making. So that's the most simplistic concept of parts. But when you think about that and we expand that idea a little bit more, we can understand how the brain fragments into creating all these different parts. And the concept of parts is not new, or it's not unique just to trauma. It exists in other models of therapy as well. So let's take a look at 4 areas where the concept of parts comes up and then see how that can be used, applied, and integrated all together for a common use or a common goal. So, when it comes to trauma, we talk about 5 parts. The part of us that is going on with normal life. We have the fight part of us, the flight part of us, the freeze part of us, and then the fawn part of us. So, what this might look like is we'll just use myself for an example. I always had that going on with normal part of me because I got up, I showered, I did what I was supposed to do, I've studied, I've gone to jobs, I've gone to school, I've raised kids. That's the going on with normal part of me. But there's other parts of me as well, such as when I hear a car pull into my driveway, my heart actually starts to pound because of a past memory. Not because I'm afraid of the current moment, it's just simply because of a past memory. Now, that might be a flight part because I'm looking to run, is really what it comes down to. Or maybe it's a fight part that's looking to perhaps defend myself to whatever's coming through the door. But then there's other experiences that I've had where maybe I'm getting into an argument, I feel triggered, and I fawn and give in to the person and just give in with whatever they want to do, so this way I don't have to deal with the fight or flight. Or maybe there's a situation where I will just freeze. That one's actually pretty common, where I'm in an argument and I go to open my mouth to speak and literally nothing will come out and I will just squeak. I've frozen. All of these different parts exist within me, and basically based on what's triggered will show up with a different part with what's actually taking over. But in the meantime, there's still always that going on with normal life part. So that's how it looks in trauma. And the more fragmented these parts become, the more we can shift towards the spectrum of dissociative identity disorder. But on the lighter side of things, we can just have these parts existing and constantly in conflict and taking over and doing different things based on the trigger. So that's what it looks like in the trauma perspective. And when we're working with it from that trauma perspective, we want to see how those different parts actually protected you in what once was a different or difficult situation, or potentially even life-threatening situation. So if your life is being threatened, maybe it makes more sense to fight, or to flight, or to freeze, or to fawn and play dead. Basically, at the time that the trauma occurred, this part developed to protect you, and now this part automatically responds when a trigger comes up. And that's basically how the trauma model is working, these different parts. We also see the concept of parts when it comes to internal family systems, which is a model of therapy that is used to kind of help people work through the conflicts in their life. So, under this model, we still recognize that there are parts, but that these parts are kind of doing different things, very similar to the way trauma does it. So, we have exiles, I call them demons, and these are the parts of ourselves that we don't want to see, we don't want anyone to see them. These may be things like shame. If you're ashamed of something, you don't want anyone else to know what you're ashamed of. So you shove that into the shadows, and I'll get to the shadows in a moment. But those exiled parts, those demons, stay hidden in the shadows. Then we have what they call managers. I call them guardians. I think of them like hellhounds. Their whole job is to ensure that those exiled demons stay in the shadows. So these might be things like perfectionism. So if I feel ashamed by my mistakes, I might use perfectionism to hide that exiled part. And so now that perfectionist part of me comes out, where it has to be just right, or I might not even start the project because I don't want to have to deal with the shame that's hiding in the shadows. Then we have the firefighters. I call them dragons because it's horrible when you're working with firefighters to tell them about this part because it doesn't sound good. Firefighters, or what I call dragons, come in and they basically wipe everything out. So when that shame wanders out of the shadows and you don't know how to deal with it because you don't have these coping skills that are going to help you deal with this, you're going to choose an unhealthy coping mechanism. Maybe something like alcohol or drugs, and you're going to use that to deal with the feelings related to shame. The problem is that the coping mechanism that you used often creates more damage. So like with alcoholism, you're going to do a lot of damage to your liver, you're going to impair your cognition, you're going to perhaps make some bad decisions, you're going to maybe have some hurtful things said, but it got rid of the shame for the moment, and you didn't have to deal with that shame. But now, once the buzz wears off, you're going to have to deal with the mess of whatever happened from that night of binge drinking. So that firefighter or dragon deals with the exile, but it creates a lot more damage. So if you think of like a damage or a dragon that comes in, breathes fire, wipes out all the problems, but you're left with scorched earth in response. So when we're talking about internal family systems, we're talking about all these different parts of you that are constantly in motion and interacting with each other, from the parts that are exiled, those demons that are hiding, to the managers or the guardians that are trying to keep them in balance, and then these firefighters or dragons that are coming in to deal with the things from the shadows that are really unpleasant. And we've developed these parts throughout our life, and they're constantly in motion and interacting with each other. So that's the basics of internal family systems and dealing with all those different parts. So when we're talking about parts from an emotionally focused therapy perspective, we're usually talking about younger versus older, wiser self parts. So how this might look, and these don't have fancy names, just younger, older self. When I was younger, I was betrayed by my biological father, leaving and abandoned, and I was betrayed by my experience with my mother, and then I was betrayed by several very close friends in childhood and my teen years. That betrayed part of me, that younger part of me that had those betrayal wounds, definitely carried into my older years. And because I was trying to protect myself, I go ahead and develop all these different coping mechanisms to deal with that betrayal, the pain of it. I want to make sure it doesn't happen again. So my younger parts, the 9-year-old whose father left, the 9-year-old who was sexually abused, the child whose mother was not emotionally attuned and was abusive, the best friend who betrayed me at the age of 12. All these different parts, different ages develop. Now I can use my older, wiser self to go back and provide comfort to these different parts of my younger self to basically reprocess and get through the experience. So for that friend that betrayed me at 12 years old, now I can comfort myself and comfort that 12-year-old self to say, it really had nothing to do with me. It was everything about her insecurities and why she chose to be a person who would betray me. And you can actually go ahead and heal some of the past by working with younger versus older parts of self. And that's part of what we do in emotionally focused therapy. Now, parts work isn't new. In fact, Carl Jung suggested the same a long time ago. And if you know some of the things about the earlier theorists like Freud and Carl Jung, you know that Carl Jung suggested that we have what we call a shadow self. This is the part of us where we put all the things that we don't like about ourselves and we hide it into the shadows of our subconscious, and it sits there. And that if you really want to achieve good mental health, you have to be willing to examine this shadow self. That's why so many people are doing shadow work right now, is because they're looking at these deeper parts of themselves that they've hidden away for so long to try to get them to be integrated into the whole self so that they can achieve their mental health. These four concepts are not separate. They are all connected because they are all dealing with the different parts of ourselves that we have. And so I will explain how I integrate all of these parts work into what I do. So once we've established a good therapeutic relationship, we can actually go into your affect assembly and try to map all of this out to kind of figure out how things are going for you. We start with the trigger. We look at identifying the emotion. A lot of times I use the feelings wheel because it works really well for my dismissive and my fearful avoidance. I use it myself. Highly recommend working with the feelings wheel. So now you have the emotion. What story or narrative is there around this experience, this trigger, and this emotion? That story is going to start to kind of tell me what's going on with all your different parts. And then what protection do you use to deal with all of this? So now I can look at what type of dragons do you have? What type of demons do you have? What type of guardians do you have? What protections are you using? Whether you're activating or deactivating, and is it a fight, a flight, a freeze, or a fawn response? What have you hidden in those shadows? And what age did all of this develop from, so that I can kind of help you take your older, wiser self and give some comfort and compassion to that younger self so that you can create a new story around this event that basically caused you some pain and developed this protection. It sounds like a lot. It really isn't. It goes much faster as you get used to it. And then a lot of times we can go ahead and have conversations with our younger self. Now, I love the car for this. You're in your car, everybody's got Bluetooth. Nobody gives a shit if you're talking to yourself. Nobody really even knows because you're in your car. But now I can take my older, wiser self and I can talk to my younger parts of self, and I can use all of this knowledge about the different parts to be able to reprocess what I learned about the original trauma and create a new story, a new narrative, and a new protection or coping mechanism to deal with all of that. And then when you're in the therapeutic space, after we've gotten through all of that, we can take a look at what this experience was like for you to reprocess it, because the first few times it feels really awkward and weird. And then as you get used to it, you realize just how crucial it is. We can celebrate it, and then we can try it again on a new thing, a new trigger point that you have, and we go through it again until you get really comfortable with it. And we go through this cycle over and over again until you are so comfortable with it, you can do it without me. So hopefully that parts work information kind of helps you shed some light, gives you some self-awareness, and you'll be willing to talk about it with your therapist to see if this is a right pathway and treatment option for you.